Thanks for joining us on the news at 1. Let's take a look at your market news now. Hong Kong stocks climbed to a fresh record today as investors tracked another milestone on Wall Street, but Asia-wide markets struggled to keep up the recent momentum. Nonetheless, traders remain bullish on equities thanks to a healthy global economic outlook, optimism over the impact of Donald Trump's tax cuts and strong corporate earnings. Tokyo shares closed lower on late profit-taking after its main index temporarily broke above the 24,000 mark for the first time in more than 26 years. The Nikkei index lost 0.4%. Data showed that China's economy grew by much more than expected last year. The Hang Seng index climbed by 0.4%. The Shanghai Composite Index rose by 0.8%. U.S. stocks rose yesterday and the Dow Jones Industrial Average closed above 26,000 for the first time as investors' expectations for higher earnings lifted stocks across the sectors. The S&P 500 also posted a record closing high. More than three-quarters of the 36 S&P 500 companies have reported so far have topped earnings estimates. Outlooks for future earnings are rosy as well due to the lower corporate tax rates passed in December. The Dow Jones Industrial Average climbed by 1.2%. The S&P 500 gained 0.9% and the Nasdaq Composite Index added 1.0%. Let's take a look at the markets now. Ian Cruikshanks from the South African Institute of Race Relations joins me in studio now. Thanks so much for your time on SABC News.
Thank you.
Let's start with the MPC decision that's announced, going to be announced shortly. Some economists believe that interest rates will remain unchanged. Is this your view? And if it's not, just explain to us why you think the MPC is going to make the decision that they may make.
The decision I expect is that rates will remain unchanged. The factors that influence it most of all, of course, why could they possibly cut rates? Because inflation is lower and therefore it's less of a threat, and the fact that the economy is seeming to pick up just a little bit, but it needs a boost. It really needs encouragement. The Ramaphosa effect isn't really going to stimulate a whole new business climate. So it would be helpful for business as a basic cost of capital to see that cost lower. On the other hand, why should they increase rates? Because of a threat of future inflation. I think that is pushed away a little bit. It doesn't represent a short-term impact on the market, and it's more likely to say, listen, as it is, it's still settling. We have a lot of political as well as economic uncertainty right now, but there is some corporate activity which looks a little more encouraging, so let's just leave it as it is and watch it for a couple of months more.
Would it be correct to say that perhaps the MPC would be waiting for things such as the budget, as well as perhaps any future decisions that have to do with President Jacob Zuma, as well as watching the Rand as well, which has been doing quite well? Are those factors that are going to influence what happens perhaps in the next MPC?
Undoubtedly. And you know, if you just look at the Rand as an indicator of confidence in the economy, as South Africa as an investment destination, it really has strengthened quite considerably over the last month or so. This year's performance has been quite stellar, in fact. So I would say that is encouraging, and that will be a factor which will weigh on the MPC, that they don't have to take any strong action right now. And as far as inflation is concerned, well, of course, that is dropping down, so there doesn't need too much attention there either. I think overall, the investment climate is improving.
We've seen the Rand hitting 2-year highs, as you're saying, doing very well. There's also a sense that because of the Rand doing so well, there's a chance that our fuel prices are going to decrease, and then perhaps our food prices will also be affected by that as consumers, and perhaps we'll have a reprieve. At what point are we able to say that may happen?
I think it remains a possibility. It is a possibility right now. It's a possibility. If the dollar-rand exchange rate and the dollar price of oil stay where they are now, that is the direct impact on what we pay for oil in rands, and then what our petrol price is going to be. I think that we could safely expect a cut in the petrol price within the next month, perhaps as early as next month. So that's quite positive.
Yeah, that is.
And we've got to grab these positives.
Yeah. Let's go to something that's perhaps not so positive. Yes. We saw the Steinhoff report coming out by Viceroy. They were at the time what people called a faceless company. No one knew who the people behind it were. Today, some people coming out and saying we are the individuals behind the Viceroy reports. 3 individuals, one a British former social worker. Yes. The impact of Steinhoff, obviously the report and the dealings at Steinhoff on the share price, and then the subsequent rumours that Viceroy was compiling a report on another South African company, wiped off about $3 billion.
Huge amount.
Off property stocks. Alfen saw their share price dropping a little bit and recovering because people thought perhaps they were the company. What I want to ask is, what role does speculation like that play, and at what point do regulators, if any, have to come in and say, you cannot just start a rumour and crash someone's share price? It's quite a murky area. How do you decide what happens?
To start off with, if the rumour can be substantiated, then it's no longer a rumour. It is a fact. It looks as though this was a fact. Steinhoff was in a lot of trouble. It was just exposing it to the attention of investors, and when that came about and the whole financial community saw the baseless foundations that it had, I think that's something that should be known by the public. And so to say no, you mustn't expose this data, that's wrong. It must be exposed.
Perhaps I was asking, with Steinhoff we saw that they were correct, they had a report. When rumours came out that they were doing a second report, no one said who the report was about, and there was panic in the markets. We saw that money leaving property stocks especially, and Alfen. How do you regulate that area, or is it just a thing that's not regulated, and sorry if your stock is the one that's rumoured to be behind a Viceroy report?
In the companies themselves, it's up to each company to make sure that it maintains unquestionable standards in accounting, in preparing of their balance sheets and profit and loss statements. If they do that and they give regular updates to the investment community, and these are seen to be accurate, then there can't be speculation. There's nothing wrong with speculation. It's a part of activity. It's just a short-term investor, but with a very, very short-term time horizon. So I don't think one can say no more speculators. You have to take a position and hold it for 6 months or 12 months. Gee, I think that's a bit harsh, because cash may be needed for something more attractive in the meantime.
Let's go to the United States now. We're seeing S&P breaking records, doing very, very well. Donald Trump taking credit for the American economy doing very well. Why are we seeing the S&P 500, as well as the Dow Jones Industrial Average, I think to a certain extent, doing very, very well and breaking these records?
Well, what they are reflecting is companies' potential to produce higher profits, to satisfy investors and pay higher dividends, and to grow the area in which they operate. So I think that is a big part of it. And you have to look at the overall US economy. Well, what does it mean? Gee, it's nearly 25% of the global economy, so it is very, very important. What it's indicating with the S&P 500 growing at this sort of level, that there's substance to the expectations that the whole US economy could go at 3.5% or maybe more. And if that is so, then it's justified to see the stocks at record highs.
Ian Cruikshanks from the South African Institute of Race Relations, thanks so much for your time on SABC News. Time for a short break. I'll have more business news for you after that. Please stay with us.